Hey everybody, welcome back to VideoMS. So today we're continuing the series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we're playing Dynagear, published by Sammy and developed by Scarab. Now this definitely doesn't qualify as one of my favorite games of all time. I have a real love and hate relationship with this game. It's basically Metal Slug if in Metal Slug you fought dinosaurs with medieval weapons versus fighting enemies with guns. And when it works, it is a fun time, but this game makes you struggle for your enjoyment, both in a gameplay perspective and just an overall design perspective. But it is a fun game to talk about and a fun game to look at, so let's jump right into Dynagear. And as we get into the intro to the game here in the jungle, it kind of feels like Ghosts and Goblins and Metal Slug had a baby and this game came out of the back. It also has a little bit of a Cadillac and dinosaur vibe just because we're fighting dinosaurs, and that's what I'm going to think of. But this is in no way, shape, or form a beat 'em up. It is a run and gun, and it definitely moves you extremely fast. When you're running, the screen is going to be scrolling a ton, which is one of the first design flaws in my opinion. In some stages you get too close to the right hand edge of the screen and you can't really see what's coming up against you. It just gives you some cheap hits that are going to end up resulting in cheap deaths, and because this game's checkpoint system can be so cruel, it ends up feeling a little bit unfair. But let's do positives first. I will say that graphically this game's not going to win any awards, but it pushes around a ton of sprites, it's got some fun screen space effects, and everything seems to run relatively well. The art is definitely that kind of a Amiga feel to it, for lack of a better term, but it does kind of just have a charm and sense of place to it that definitely does have an interesting vibe. But as you see here, as I get into the flowers, you're never quite sure what the weak spot on an enemy is going to be, and you're moving so quickly through the game world you can barely even see the enemy coming before you have to shoot it. We'll take our first checkpoint there, and the thing about this game is you need to checkpoint, or else if you die, you're going to have to go back to the beginning of the stage. While I'm not saying that Coin is inspired by Mortal Kombat, definitely has some Mortal Kombat vibes to me. This is the thing about Dynagear. You can have fun with it, but you're going to have to fight for your fun. And it all comes down to the later stages with that checkpoint system. When you lose your life, you're going to have to go back to the checkpoint, and if you get stuck in a particular area, you're just going to continue to see that checkpoint over and over and over again. And because this game moves so fast and there's so many patterns, it can become very difficult to actually memorize what you need to do. In between each stage, you get some dinosaur buddies here that don't really seem to do much of anything, then you move on to the next area in the game. And you do have a choice of weapons. You've got an axe, you've got an arrow, you've got a bow, you've got a sword. They all have their own use case scenario, and some of them are going to almost instantly kill a boss if you get in the right spot. But I will say this game had potential, and that's why it's here on the series. Not every single game on an Unported Playlist is technically one of my favorites of all time, and I'm assuming most people will not have even heard of Dynagear. If you know this game and you have played it before, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. It is fun. I don't want you to think that this game is not worth playing. I definitely would check it out. Just go in being aware that you're going to find frustration within this game. And if you see the credits, it's going to be whether or not you were charmed enough by what you've seen up until the point where it gets very difficult as to whether or not you're going to actually want to learn the patterns and be able to get by those pain points. I feel like it's going to be a coin flip 50-50. 50% of you that play this game are going to want to see what else it has to offer, and the other 50% of you are going to turn it off about midway through, which is totally fair. Just because you start a game does not mean you need to finish it. We all get less and less time as we get older, so don't spend your time on games that frustrate you. But I will say sometimes this game just doesn't explain anything of what's going on, and it can be frustrating. If you even so much as try to get up on this platform, that Stegosaurus there is going to hit you. You're going to take a game over, and you're going to need to return back to the previous checkpoint and fight the same mini-boss you did before. If you take any damage whatsoever, you're going to have to go into the next section with less life, which just compounds the difficulty. What you actually need to do is bring the right weapon in and get all the way up towards the edge where the dinosaur can't hit you, but you can just kind of skim this little mace against his hitbox. You need to figure these things out in the game, or else you're constantly going to be taking damage. So when you actually do get to a boss fight, you're only going to have one hit left, and when you die, you're going to have to go back a third into the level and continue from there. And I will say, I always give you guys a sample of the soundtrack, and I always say it's great, but in Dynagear, it's kind of middling, maybe a C-. Listen, and I'll be right back. Yeah, I mean, it's a soundtrack and those are sound effects, but they're wildly out of balance, and honestly, pretty much every game that Sammy published had some really interesting sound. I'm not saying that every game they published had bad soundtracks, but the sound hardware on Sammy hardware always seemed to be a little bit intense, for lack of a better term. It just seems like it's almost clipping every single channel it has. But as we move on further into the game and get in more confined spaces, this is where the game becomes even more difficult, because these mushrooms here will affect you. You can explode, but it is so hard to hit them if you don't have the right weapons. Some weapons just have a linear path, some weapons will home in on your enemies, and some will have this little charge sequence where you can shoot those axes out. But even though the axes do shoot out in every direction, they don't go down, so that little mushroom is going to explode on you 9 out of 10 times. But the game does give you branching pathways. We can go up here and deal with these boulders, which is a fun time. There is a good game somewhere in Dynagear, but as I run down this hill here, you're going to see that there's enemies coming at me, and I'm at the very edge of the bottom of the screen, which means that you have almost no time to actually react to what's coming towards you. And that can just end up like it's feeling like you're taking cheap deaths in this game. We have all these lizardmen coming out, and they're coming from both directions on the screen. There basically is no place where you can be safe. Sometimes you're just going to be forced to take damage, which is fine. I understand that it is an arcade game and it does want your quarters, but sometimes you take that damage right before you go to a boss fight and you end up going in with basically no health left. It feels like it is here to try to make you put more quarters in the game, but it doesn't succeed because it doesn't make a fun enough game to compel you to want to continue to spend actual money. Now obviously via emulation, if you want to play this, you're just putting in virtual quarters, so it doesn't matter. And these boulders falling here, you think they have some sort of cadence, but they don't. They only fall when you're on the wall. If you think you can wait and do some timing there, 10 out of 10 times I do that, the boulders fall the minute I get back on the wall. But as we get to the next boss fight here, I at least love the Street Fighter style Dragon Punch uppercut. It does have a fun vibe to it. And that is the other thing about Dynagear. When it is charming you, it is charming. When it is frustrating you, it is frustrating you to the severest of degrees. You just need to find the fun in this game. If you're a big fan of dinosaurs, it's definitely going to be a benefit. If you don't care about fighting dinosaurs whatsoever, it's probably not going to catch you too much. But you'll see here I take another death, and I need to restart the checkpoint all over again. But in this instance, the checkpoint is basically just before the boss, not a third of the way back on the level. The checkpoint system in this game is very weird. Sometimes you have to play like half a level again, sometimes you don't, but it's not just because you're near the boss. A lot of times with the boss you got to keep going back. One more taste of soundtrack though. This one is a little better I guess, and I'll be right back. So yeah, it's another soundtrack track, and if you can hear it beyond the sound effects, then maybe you'll enjoy it. But as we run through the next area, this is where the game gets exceedingly difficult. The first 3 levels were definitely open with that Metal Slug running gun vibe, but now we have a labyrinth to deal with. We're going to be having shots coming from down below and above on the top, and there's a lot of instances in which you cannot attack those enemies until you get on their level. So there's areas where you're being shot at that you can do absolutely nothing about, and with the patterns on the bullets being so random and organic, sometimes again you're just going to be forced to take damage when you have no option whatsoever. That's the #1 design sin in any video game in my opinion. If you get hit by your enemy, it should be because you made a mistake and you didn't read the patterns. There should never be an instance in which you have to take mandatory damage because the game just wants you to. That ends up feeling totally unfair versus being challenging. Think of a bullet hell game where you had to take a death because there was no way around that bullet pattern. No one would want to play that game whatsoever. That's the problem that Dynagear has in spots. It's going to force you to get damaged, and then when you die, it's going to force you back to a checkpoint. Like this area here with these little flamethrowers. That's not that hard to get through, but the next time you see the flamethrowers, they're going to do something completely different, and reading the pattern is basically near to impossible. Maybe if you're a glutton for punishment and you like exceedingly hard games and you're a big fan of dinosaurs, Dynagear is going to have something here for you. For me, it's a fun example of a game that most people probably didn't know existed and have probably never seen before. But you'll see here with this flamethrower set, they're at such an angle that you basically need to be pixel perfect not to take damage, or you're going to end up with another continue and trying to play it all over again. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you even knew Dynagear existed in the first place. I'm assuming most people are going to be finding out about this game from this this video. But short of that, I'm going to take another death here, and I am totally done playing this game. I've never seen the ending, and I probably never will. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.